So more than 80% of the Korean population is expected to vote in this year's presidential election. That will be, if realised, a level not seen in 2 decades. For more on how voters have been encouraged to hit the polls and what needs to be done to make those ballots count, Soo-young reports.
People waiting for a train or simply passing through Seoul Station ahead of the presidential election on Tuesday were invited to kill time by walking through the voting procedure.
This mock voting booth is just one of the gimmicks Korea's National Election Commission has initiated to encourage citizens to cast their ballots.
Other Get Out the Vote campaigns feature celebrity endorsements and encourage the public to post selfies on social media. And this year, for the first time, Koreans have been allowed to upload photos of themselves gesturing or indicating the number of their preferred candidate.
In the past, we simply reminded people to vote. But nowadays, it's all about communicating and building an understanding with voters through participation. So we've initiated street concerts and open discussions for citizens.
Voter turnout in both the presidential and parliamentary elections over the last 2 decades has amounted to some 63%. While the presidential election turnout is above the OECD average of around 70%, there's still room for improvement.
The turnout in elections differs depending on what kinds of issues are at hand that year. Also, Korea has some form of election every year, so the level of interest can falter compared to some European countries where there is just one general election every 4 years.
To increase voter turnout, there are currently 26 countries that enforce mandatory voting laws with varying penalties for those who don't cast their ballots.
The difference in turnout between countries with enforced compulsory voting and those without compulsory voting is about 10 to 15 percentage points. And another interesting thing is that in countries that have switched from compulsory voting to voluntary voting, and this includes the Netherlands and Chile and Venezuela and others, turnout has dropped sharply. But I think in most countries without compulsory voting, if you were to introduce it, a lot of people would become quite upset. In the United States, for example, I think many people see the right not to vote as part of the freedom of expression.
Korea's National Election Commission decided not to adopt the mandatory system in the early 2000s. For the 18th parliamentary election, we tried offering incentives. For example, countries like Japan offer discounts on shopping and movie tickets, but that wasn't very successful here.
Most experts believe the turnout rate in Korea can be boosted without mandatory voting or incentives. Unlike countries such as Australia or the Netherlands, where citizens must register to vote, Koreans can head straight to the polls. Also, the early voting system, launched in 2013, has so far proven to have lifted turnout.
We should add more days to the early voting period beyond the current 2 we have now and extend the voting hours. We could also introduce electronic or online voting, allowing many more citizens to participate at a lower cost.
But more than the number of votes, experts say it's the quality of the vote that matters most.
There are lots of democracies which have fairly high voter turnout, but where the quality of government is not particularly good. So there's basically little, if any, relationship between the two. There's even some reason to believe that in some situations, higher turnout actually makes things worse. Because as I mentioned before, you get more people voting who have low levels of political knowledge.
In Germany, where the turnout is near 80% without mandatory voting, the value of politics and democracy and the notion that a single vote contributes to making government better is embedded in public education. That's something Korea should consider encouraging.
Experts say increasing the number of informed voters through greater accessibility and better civic education is what counts the most toward creating a stronger democracy. Soo-young, Arirang News.